Well, welcome to your next GIMP tutorial. We're going to cover a couple things that I use in nearly every graphic that I do. Four things. We're going to talk about gradients. We're going to talk about fonts. We're going to talk about um, layers and transparency, and we're going to talk about the scaling tool. Might even throw one more in there if I called a drop shadow. These are things I use in just about every graphic I do that can take a flat, boring image and just give it a little bit of pop. So, um, what I'll do is I'll just walk you through how I created the last graphic that I used for my church, um, and used all of those tools. Simple stuff, but can add a lot of pop to your graphic. So we're going to start by creating a new project. For all of my stuff, what I post, it's almost always 1920 by, I'll change that to 1080, 1920 by 1080. Here under the advanced options, you can change what it starts out as. I like to start out with a transparent background. So it says fill with, always put transparency. Click OK. That gives us our blank canvas to start working on. Now, first thing I usually start with is the background, what I want the background to look like. And so for this image, I'm going to show you two things. The first tool up here is called the fill tool, the bucket fill. If you click on that, whatever color right here in your foreground, if you just click on it, that's what it's going to fill it with. If you want just a solid color, easy peasy. If you click on that little color box, it brings up all your options to find any color in the rainbow. And then you can fill in. I get my colors from a lot of places. There are Google searches online that if you just put in, hey, I would like a color that's forest green, it'll tell you exactly what to put in, usually in this HTML notation. It tells you exactly what 6 characters to put in here to get that exact color. So there are a lot of ways to get your colors. Um, Sometimes a flat image is what we want. I like to use what's called a gradient to make it pop just a little bit. So we're going to cancel out of there. I'm going to undo this real quick. In GIMP, the Control Z, or up here, Edit, Undo. It's your best friend. All right, so for me, where the bucket fill is, if you right click on that, it pulls up the other option, the other tool that kind of goes in the same category called the gradient. Now, I use gradients for a lot of things. It just creates a little more depth to a background, so I like to use the gradient. So what you see here is how the gradient works. If you click on this little, it's on my screen, they're very tiny. You can probably change this, but on the computer I have, all these things are real small. This little window right here, you click on that, and it brings up kind of how the gradient's going to work. So um, we want to go from our foreground to our background color. So these all have different ways that that works. And you can play with it, see which one you like the best. You can also go from a foreground to transparent. That's this one right here. And then they have a bunch of pre-programmed ones that you can just fill in if there's something like you're trying to make something look like it's gold. It's already got a built-in gradient for you. So I'm going to start with foreground to background. It kind of blends together. I'm going to click on that one. All right. I think that's the one that's already on there. But now, if this is my foreground color and this little one next to it is my background color, I want to make sure I'm doing a gradient to what I want. And so I'm going to change this background color. You just click on where this little black box is. And I want to go from our pretty green to a white. And I'll show you kind of how we do this. So I've got the gradient tool selected. I've got the foreground color, the background color. I have what we want to do. And so all you have to do then is click where you want to start the gradient and click where you want to stop the gradient. So click, it's not doing it. There we go. Try that again. Click and hold, and it'll drag it where you want this gradient to go. Okay. So you change these, you can see it kind of creates a from a white to our green. And I actually want it to go the other way. So here's how you do that. Check this. Easy peasy. There's this little window right next to your gradient colors. All look at that. Automatically switched it. Now, I don't like this much white. And so what I want to do is to create more green than white. The way I want to do that is I'm going to zoom way out. Down here, this is how you zoom in and out. I'm going to zoom way out. I'm going to pull this white about as far down as I can get it so that it goes from our dark green to just a hint of a lighter green. I think that's probably about right. And when you've got these where you want it, you just hit enter. And it's locked in. I'm going to take us back to 100% and see how we did. I like that. We'll go with that. We'll call that good. Now, the series that we did was called Sacred Rhythms. And so I had an image of a prayer labyrinth that I wanted to kind of use and kind of fade it into the background. And so the way you do that is if you come up over here, you click File, and we're going to open this image that I found on a free website that was a labyrinth. And you open it as a layer. If you open it as anything else, it's gonna not go into this project. So we want to open this as a layer. And now I've got the little where I found where I saved our prayer labyrinth, and it'll pop it right in there for us. Now, as you can see over here, your toolboxes might be in different locations on your screen. For me, my layers are all right over here. So we have the background layer that we were working on. That's the very first thing that popped up. When I open this as a layer, it allows me to edit all of these things without messing up my background. So I can do any changes I want to this, and it won't change my background. Likewise, I can change my background without messing up my labyrinth. The other cool thing about your layers is if you hit the little eyeball, it allows you to make it invisible so that you can work on this and be like, okay, say I wanted to change my background. I go mess with my background, come back to my labyrinth. Now, what I did with this was I wanted to make it a little bit bigger and make it part of the background. That's where we get into the next tool that I'm going to show you, our scale tool. That's this one right here. It's got a little thing and an arrow to a big thing. That's your scale tool. Click on that. Now, there are a couple ways that you can do the scaling of a layer. Easiest thing is to click on your scale tool, make sure you have the right layer selected, and click on that. You'll notice that these little boxes pop up around it. That means that you are now able to scale the thing you just clicked on. Right? Now, a couple ways to do that. If you click one of these little boxes and drag them, see how that scales? Makes it bigger, makes it smaller. And when you let go, that's what size we got. Now, a couple tricks. I'm gonna reset this. I'm gonna show you a couple quick little tricks to get this to work right. Quick note: if you click on any of these, it'll just start scaling it in that direction, pulling it from the opposite side. All right, a couple quick tips. When I opened this labyrinth as a layer, it put it in the very middle of the image for me. I want to leave it there. I don't want to drag this and then have to go find the middle again, which is fairly easy to do, but that's a different tutorial for a different day. So what I can do is I can click this and press the control button. Now when I scale it, it pulls all the tabs together and leaves the middle where it was. Okay? I like using that so that I don't move the center of whatever it is that I'm trying to adjust. All right? Now, another quick trick with this, if you do the same thing, but instead of hitting the control button, you hit the shift button, it only pulls in the direction that you're dragging it. So you can make things skinnier or thicker or taller or shorter by holding down the shift button. We're not doing that with this, so I'm going to reset those. Again, if you get it to where you don't want it, come up here and click the reset button. I'm going to click on this, hold the control button, and drag it out till it's the size I think I want. Now, when I let go and I hit enter, boom. That's the look I want. Now, here's the problem with this. I want it to be part of the background and I want it to kind of fade into the background, but the labyrinth is bright white. How do we correct that? Well, you can come over here and try our bucket fill and mess with all this stuff. But there's a cool trick that helps you blend something into a background. If you click on the layer that you're working on, so over here we'll click on the labyrinth, and you drag the opacity. So every layer can be see-through. And so if you just drag this down, if you drag this opacity down, it makes it more see-through and also just blends it right into the background. So something like that gives me the look that I want for our background before I start putting the text and all the other things that I might do on top of this. That makes a pretty decent background. All right, so I'm gonna leave that as it is. Now for the graphic, uh, our title was called Sacred Rhythms, and I'm gonna put that over the top. So you come over here, the letter A, that's your text tool. Okay, so I'm gonna come over here and click anywhere because by the time you start messing with stuff, you're gonna have to readjust where it goes anyway. So you just ours was called Sacred Rhythms. Okay. Now notice the font is the color that we had selected. So I probably should have switched this before I started typing. But easy to change. You just click on in your little toolbox here that pops up when you start typing. You click here. I'm going to go down and select my white. If you don't have white in your preset colors, it's always this very top left corner or FFFFFF if you ever need to get back to white. Click OK. Oh, look, all of a sudden I'm white. Now, this number here is your font size. For this, it's usually something around 250. Oh, that's way too big. Let's try 200. 200 is going to be about right. Now, I already know the font I want because whenever I'm doing fonts, what I usually do is I go and I open like Microsoft Word, type out a word of the thing that I'm trying to put on here, and then I go through a million fonts and I spend way too much time picking out fonts. So I'll save you that particular task. Once you know the font you want, you come up here in this window and type the one we're going to use is Copper Plate. Actually, we're going to do Copper Plate Light. So let's come back to that. Copper Plate Gothic Light. All right. 200 might be just a little bit big. So let's drop it down to like 190. All right. Now, oh crap, our text is all the way off the screen. So what you do now, there's this little tool. See this is your move tool. Whatever you have selected, um, whatever you click on, it'll move. Now, oh, we're going to still be a little too big. If you want to come back in and edit your font, you go back to your font tool, click in that window. I'm gonna select all of it, so it's just like in any other word processor. If you hold down the shift button, you see how it's putting a little yellow box around everything. If you hold down the shift button, that's how you highlight things. Make this a little smaller. Let's go. Let's see what 180 does. Yeah, closer. We'll call 175 good. So I'm gonna go back to my move tool and put this in the middle. Okay, so I can eyeball that and say that's probably pretty good. But what if I want to make sure it's good? What if I want to be really precise and make sure that's in the middle? Well, that's our alignment tool. So just how we right click to get to our gradient tool, if you come over here to the move tool and right click, there's your align tool. All right. Now, whatever you click on in the align tool, see how these little handles popped up? Okay. Now you can come over here. This one is aligned to the center of the target. See how it shifted just a touch? Okay, that means I wasn't quite in the middle. Guess I can't eyeball things. This one is the center up to down. Guess I was a touch high. I'm going to call that pretty good though. So now, since I've clicked both of these, align to the center, align to the middle, done and dusted. But you have all these other options too. If you want to put something all the way to the left or all the way to the right, um, it's easy to get something aligned where you want it. Okay. Well, now I've got a pretty good graphic here. I've got a background that looks okay. I've got my font that looks okay. but it still feels a little flat. And by flat, I mean that um, I don't know. There's not. It's not dynamic. There's no depth to it. And so, what I want to do is I want to pull those letters out a little bit. Now, I'm going to give you one of my tricks, um, and that is if I'm ever editing a layer and I want to test some things and I don't want to screw up the original layer, I always make a duplicate layer. Easy to do. So I'm gonna mess with this text, and so I don't want to mess with all of this. It's centered. It's the font I want. It's the size I want. And so if I don't want to screw anything up, what I do is I make a duplicate. So make sure you're on this and come down here. This little button right here is the duplicate button or the duplicate button. Click on that and it makes an exact copy of the layer that you were on, that you had highlighted. So now remember, we can make this invisible. All right. So now I can mess with this layer all I want. And if I don't like it, I screw it up, it's awful, I can delete that layer and go right back to the text layer. Easy peasy. All right. So we're going to mess with this one. And so the other tool I told you I was going to show you to provide a little bit of depth and a little bit of dynamic element to your graphic is called drop shadow. Here's how you do that. So we have the layer we're going to mess with highlighted, right? We come up to our filters. There's a whole lot of fun stuff. I recommend just creating a blank image and messing around. That's how I learned all this stuff. I just went in here and started messing with all this stuff and seeing what they did. It was kind of fun. Under light and shadow is what you call your drop shadow. So click on that. Now, it has a built-in sort of presets here, but if you notice, right underneath kind of all of this, put a little shadow under each of our letters. So what this tool does is anything that's not transparent, it gives it a little bit of shadow. Here's how you can mess with this stuff. A plain white background, you'll be able to see this a whole lot better. I'll create one of those real quick. So yeah, here's another little trick. Bonus tool you didn't realize. This creates a new layer. We'll call it white backgrounds. Now you can fill it with transparent, but there's also a preset for filling it with white. Ta-da! Now it's all the way at the top. We want it behind our text, so we're going to bring it right back down here. All right. That's not really going to work well because our text is also white. That's okay. When I do the drop shadow, you'll be able to see it. Light and shadow. There we go. Okay, now you can see kind of what the shadow will look like when we start playing with the parameters. All right, so this is the preset, and for most applications, that's pretty good. But our graphic, everything was centered. It was all right on. You're looking right at it, and so I'm going to change some things to make this drop shadow directly behind the letters. Okay, so your XY here is how offset and where the offset of the shadow is. So X means it's 20, I think, pixels to the right and 20 pixels below. So you can see how all of this shadow of the Y is 20 pixels this way and 20 pixels this way. I told you I want it right behind it. So I'm going to make all of these zeros. So you can do that, little arrows down here. That's one. Oh, a little too far. There we go. All right. So now if you look, that shadow, it's all directly right behind the letters. Now your blur radius, if you tap on that, it's how far or how blurry the shadow is. The less of the blur radius, the more crisp that little shadow is. Something like 10. It's going to work for ours, I believe. But it's just a parameter you can play with. You can also change the color of the shadow. I'm not sure why you want to, but you can. It's now blue. You can't really tell. If it were bigger, you'd be able to tell. For art purposes, we just want black. Again, if you don't have black down here in your presets, Black is the absence of all the stuff, so zeros throughout. Okay. Black right behind it. Now, how definitive the shadow is this here, the opacity. Right now it's at 50% opacity. Um, I like bringing it up a little bit to make it a little more defined for what we're doing. A little bit more definition is probably a good thing. So we're going to bring this up a little bit, somewhere around 0.75 or so. Also, if you don't just want to play with this and you want to type in stuff, you can click in that window and it allows you just to go 0.75. Okay. I think that looks good. Let's find out. Let's take away this white background. Okay, we got a little bit of pop. I'm gonna make it a little darker. That didn't. There it goes. All right, there we go. All right, maybe one was a little bit better. Okay, I like it. I like it. We're gonna go with it. Okay, so now you can really tell when I'm gonna make the letters that don't have the drop shadow. There you go. Okay, so remember our eyeballs make things invisible or visible. So I just made the letters visible that don't have the drop shadow. Now I'm going to show you the difference. Okay, see how it just pops a little bit? It pulls it just a little bit away from that background and gives you some depth to the image. Okay, so that's without, that's with. It just sets that text apart. So it's a decent graphic. It's not super fancy or anything, but it took me a grand total of, when I'm doing it on my own and not having to explain everything, 5 minutes. Yeah, so there you go. That was gradient. That was layers and transparency. You got a bonus uh, tool in making a new layer, and here our alignment tool. And you got text and font and drop shadow. So you got a little mix of things in there. Um, yeah, and then I always recommend, like I said, if you want to play with something, say you want to make another graphic that has the title down here at the bottom, so you can put like points in a presentation or sermon up here. You know, make a duplicate. Click on this, duplicate, make everything else invisible so you don't accidentally start messing with things. Go back to your scale tool, shrink her down, hit enter, go back to your move tool, move this down here. Now you've got a graphic that you can put the points of the sermon up here or presentation points or something like that. So, well, how do you save it? I guess I should get to that. So if you want to save the project, you come up here to save or save as, and type in the name of the project. We're going to call this Sacred Rhythms Project XCF. Okay, XCF is the GIMP handle for projects. Um, but that saves the project you're working on. Now, if you want to save the image to then be used, you come up to export. File again, export. We're going to call this Sacred Rhythms Background. Hit the export button or hit enter. Brings up exporting options. I usually don't mess with any of this. If you want to learn what all these things do, go for it. Just click export. You'll see your little status bar. Think and work its magic. Maybe. Didn't think we had quite that big a file, but it's fine. And then when this is done, boom, you're exported. Now, for each graphic you create, you have to export. So say we want that main graphic. I'm going to go make make the little text invisible, make the big text visible. Now to come back and export again. Export as Sacred Rhythms. I always call this like main image. Goes through the same process. Boom, done and dusted. So that's just a few of the tools that I use on nearly every project that I'm doing. Um, gradients or bucket fills, importing graphics. Uh, Always make sure you use free graphics online or graphics that you have permission to use, like this labyrinth. Um, and the transparency that allows me to blend in and create a background, uh, text tools, and drop shadows. And then the other ones that are just things I use all the time: scaling, alignment, moving, things like that. So you got quite a few things here, but it's how you can build just a pretty simple, but I don't know, well, looks pretty good. Good for our purposes anyway. There you go. We'll see you next time.